In this video, I'm going to cover the gross anatomy of the heart. But real briefly, I want to cover a study tip for the anatomy component of anatomy and physiology. So in anatomy, you have these long lists of terms, and you have to be able to identify where each of these terms is placed in the body on a cadaver or on a model or on a diagram. And not only that, but you have to be able to identify these terms on models from different angles or from different cross sections. So your images won't always look the same. So first off, it's really important to not just study one diagram. The best thing to do for these long lists is to do a Google image search then. So find images that look different from the one in your textbook. So here I have, this is what Google looks like for me today. And real quick, let me get my pen here. So you go to Google. Along the top you have, About, Store, Gmail, and Images. So just click on Images, and that'll bring you to a Google image search. And the Google image search is going to look something like this. And here I have circled here what I've written here, Heart Anatomy Unlabeled. So the result of this search will be a whole bunch of heart diagrams, each of which is a little bit different, and they will all be unlabeled. Now, labeled images are useful when you're learning the information for the first time. They are not that useful for studying. To study, you need to quiz yourself. So look for unlabeled images. Then look at your terms list and see if you can fill in all of the labels by yourself, because that's essentially what you'll have to do on an exam. You'll be given an unlabeled image and you'll have to identify it. So you can use labeled images to check your work, but make sure that you use unlabeled images to study. So now that we've gone over study tips, let's look at gross anatomy of the heart. So here's the heart in the middle with some red blood and some blue blood. In diagrams, the red blood represents oxygen-rich blood and the blue blood represents oxygen-depleted blood. Now in the body, deoxygenated blood does not look blue, actually. It looks like a deeper red. So you have bright red is oxygen-rich and dark red is oxygen-poor. So let's follow the path of blood here. So you have oxygen-rich blood. It doesn't really matter where you start because this is a circle, right? And it's more like a figure 8. So you have oxygen-rich blood in red, and it travels, the heart pumps it out to the rest of the body where it unloads its oxygen. And this is called the systemic circuit. The systemic circuit is the whole body system. Oxygenation of the whole body system from your toes and back again. And this is a looped system, so once the oxygen is unloaded, the blood changes color to a deep red, but designated here as blue. It comes back to the heart, and it comes back to, this is the blue side is the right side, and the red side is the left side. Now, remember, we're looking at this heart as a mirror image, so it's a little counterintuitive because this heart's right side is my left side, right? You have to imagine that it's flipped around because you're looking at it face on, so it's like looking in a mirror. So the right side, the deoxygenated blood comes back to the right side of the heart, and then the heart sends it to the lungs in what's known as the pulmonary circuit. Pulmonary refers to lungs. So all that carbon dioxide waste is unloaded. So carbon dioxide is going to be exhaled here, and we're going to inhale oxygen and put that back into the blood. So carbon dioxide waste is unloaded, exhaled. We inhale, bring in new oxygen, load up this blood. The blood comes back from the pulmonary circuit to the left side of the heart again, and then goes back to the systemic circuit to oxygenate the body. So one more time, systemic circuit is the body circuit, pulmonary circuit is the lung circuit. So you have two separate circuits going in tandem. In the systemic circuit, we take the oxygen-rich blood, send it to the body, give it to the tissues, pick up carbon dioxide, bring back the oxygen-poor, carbon dioxide-rich to the heart. Heart sends it back to the lungs again. Carbon dioxide's unloaded, oxygen is reloaded, back to the heart, back to the body. So it's heart, body, heart, lungs, heart, body, heart, lungs. Now, you may have learned in the past that arteries carry oxygen-rich blood, and that is false. That's false. You may have also learned that veins carry oxygen-poor blood. That is false, totally false. The difference between veins and arteries is not the oxygen status of the blood that it's carrying. The difference between veins and arteries is how much blood pressure they have to withstand. Arteries are vessels designed to withstand high pressure. So these are blood vessels designed to withstand high pressure. Arteries are also always leaving the heart. Always leaving heart. Because the blood going out of the heart is at high pressure. So where is an artery? This is an artery in red. This is an oxygen-rich artery. So this is artery here, leaving the heart. But also here's an oxygen-poor artery leaving the heart, going to the pulmonary circuit. So there's an oxygen-rich artery leaving for the systemic circuit and an oxygen-poor artery leaving for the pulmonary circuit. So there are oxygen-rich arteries and oxygen-poor arteries. The oxygenation status of the blood has nothing to do with it. What has to do with it is that these are blood vessels leaving the heart where the blood is under high pressure. Arteries have a special structure designed to withstand high pressure. And then veins, on the other hand, veins, they are blood vessels, arteries I'll underline too, blood vessels designed to carry low pressure blood. And they are always returning to the heart. Always returning blood to the heart. Once blood travels through these tiny, tiny blood vessels called capillaries, it loses all its pressure. It's essentially zero blood pressure coming back. So how are you getting blood back to your heart from your feet against gravity when there's no blood pressure pushing it? Well, veins have a special anatomy designed for moving that low pressure blood back to the heart. So veins and arteries they have specialized structures for moving blood under different kinds of pressures. Arteries leave the heart, veins come back. And again, oxygenation status has nothing to do with it. So if you look here is some low oxygen blood in veins returning to the heart from the systemic circuit. Here is some high oxygenated blood in veins returning to the heart. No matter how much I say it, there's going to be people who get it wrong on the exam. So please remember, veins return to the heart, arteries leave the heart. Arteries are under high pressure, veins are under very low pressure. The blood vessels leaving the heart are huge. And then they start branching and branching and branching into smaller and smaller and smaller arteries until they get into these tiny, tiny capillaries where the blood diffuses into the tissues, or the blood doesn't diffuse into the tissues, but the stuff it's carrying, the nutrients, the oxygen diffuses into the tissues. And the waste products diffuse from the tissues into the blood. The returning blood then, instead of branching out, all the branches start converging. And that's true in the systemic circuit and in the pulmonary circuit, but you see more branching in the systemic circuit because it's not just going to the lungs, it's going to the whole body. All right, so the heart lies in what's called the mediastinum. The mediastinum is just this cavity that holds the heart and a few other things, and it lies between the lungs and above the diaphragm. This is the diaphragm, this arch. It's a muscle that's important for breathing. So the heart just, saying it's in the mediastinum just means it's in this cavity between the two lungs and above the diaphragm. The base of the heart is at the top. So that top part is considered the base. It's a wide base. And then the apex is actually at the bottom. The heart lies behind the sternum, which is this hard bone that connects the ribs. The sternum is in the center, but the heart is a little bit asymmetric. So the heart does lie behind the sternum, which is center, but the left side of the heart, which is over here, the left side of the heart is bigger than the right side. And that's because the left side of the heart is taking oxygenated blood to the body. And so it has to be stronger. It has to be strong enough to pump to your toes and back. The right side of the heart is taking deoxygenated blood to the lungs. The lungs are right here. These are the lungs. The right side doesn't have to pump very far. It doesn't have to be very strong. So the left side of the heart is stronger to pump a farther distance than the right side of the heart. So your heart has this asymmetry. It's bigger on the left than on the right, so that it has more muscle on the left than on the right. And then your lungs are asymmetric to make up for that difference. So your left lung is smaller to make room for your heart, which is larger on the left. Now, your heart has been beating since before you were born, and it never gets a rest. That would create a lot of friction and inflammation if it weren't for what's known as the pericardium. The pericardium is a serous membrane, also known as a serosa. You have a few serous membranes in your body, and their role is to eliminate or reduce friction, to prevent inflammation from friction. So these serous membranes, the pericardium included, have two layers. They're these two thin layers of epithelium that have serous fluid in between them. And so they can glide back and forth past each other. If punctured, if the pericardium is punctured and the serous fluid drips out, or if the membrane becomes inflamed and swells so that the two membranes rub past each other and the fluid can't act as a lubricant, you get what's known as pericarditis. And it's excruciating every time the heart beats when that serous fluid is not working to act as a lubricant. Here's another look at it. So actually, the outermost layer of the pericardium is a fibrous layer. It's made out of dense, irregular connective tissue. It's very leathery. It's very thick, very durable. Then just beneath that, you can see if these two membranes of the serosa, of the serous membrane, it's actually one membrane that's folded back on itself, and you can see that at this junction here. Now, this membrane is made out of simple squamous epithelium. It's very thin. Remember, simple squamous cells? They're those long, flat cells with their nuclei. They're so flat that their nuclei bulges out. So it's simple squamous epithelium over there's a very, very thin connective tissue layer. So you have two of those. You have the parietal layer, which is the superficial layer, and then you have the visceral layer, which is the deep layer. And then between the parietal layer and the visceral layer, you have the fluid, the pericardial fluid, or the serous fluid. And it's this fluid that is the lubricant. Now again, I'm going to point out the parietal layer of the pericardium and the visceral layer of the pericardium are actually one sheet that's folded back on itself, and it surrounds the entire heart. And so every time the heart beats, that serous layer, that serous fluid in between those two layers acts as a lubricant, so you don't get inflammation and friction from your heart continuously beating. Now, there are other serosas in the body, and they are all structured like this. You have a superficial parietal layer, a visceral deep layer, and then the serous fluid in between. The only thing that differs is what they're called. So the one that surrounds the heart is the pericardium, but you have another one around your lungs and around your abdominal muscles, or your abdominal organs. Now, these layers all count as part of the pericardium, which is protective because of the fibrous layer. The fibrous pericardium is protective against infection or abrasion. And then the inner layer, the serous layer, is for mitigating friction, reducing friction. Now, within the pericardium, you have what more layers known as the heart wall. So the heart wall has 3 layers. The first layer is called the epicardium. The epicardium is this layer right here. That's the epicardium, number 1. The epicardium is the same membrane as the visceral layer of the pericardium. So the visceral layer of the pericardium and the epicardium are actually the same membrane. It gets counted twice. It gets counted once as part of the pericardium, and it gets counted another time as part of the heart wall. It's just that it's kind of, it's clearly part of the pericardium because it's the same, it's part of the serous membrane. But it's also so tightly fused onto the next layer of the heart wall that it gets counted there as well. So the second layer of the heart wall is called the myocardium. Myocardium. This is cardiac muscle or heart muscle. And this is the thick layer right here in pink. So that's all the muscle of the heart that allows it to contract. Third layer is the endocardium. Endo means within, epi, superficial. Okay. So the endocardium looks very much like the epicardium. It's a simple squamous epithelium, and it lines all of the heart chambers. So the heart is actually just an enlarged blood vessel. So the heart is just fancy blood vessels. And this endocardium is the same, it's continuous with the blood vessels that enter and leave it. So let's look at another image here. This is the endocardium. This is the myocardium, or the muscle. And you can see in this image that the muscle, or the myocardium, around the left ventricle is thicker than the myocardium around the right ventricle. And again, this is because the left ventricle sends the blood to the whole body, while the right ventricle only sends the blood to the lungs and back, and the lungs are right next door. Also in this image, it looks like the left ventricle has less volume. It looks like this space inside the ventricle is smaller, like it would hold less blood. That's just an imperfection in the drawing. The left and right ventricle hold the same volume of blood. It's just that the walls of the left ventricle are thicker. So in this image, I want you to notice the spiraling shape of these heart muscles. That's so that when it contracts, it does this wringing motion to squeeze out the blood, like you're wringing it out of a washcloth. I also want to point out that there is what's called a fibroskeleton in the heart, and you can see part of it here. This is part of it. The fibroskeleton, it's made out of connective tissue, and it has a few purposes. So we'll say first we have the spiral muscle, spiraling muscles, and that causes that wringing motion during heart contraction to wring out the blood. And then we have the fibroskeleton. And let me list a few purposes of the fibroskeleton. So one is structural support. The heart has 4 chambers where blood is held, and so the fibroskeleton provides support for those chambers. It also prevents wear and tear from constant stretching. you could think of this kind of like structural support, right? It creates valves. So there are valves that we'll talk about that control the direction of blood flow. So they're like little gates or doors, and those are part of the fibroskeleton. It also provides, those fibroskeleton also provides something for the cardiac muscles to pull against so that they can more effectively contract to squeeze out blood. All right, next slide. So I mentioned that the heart has 4 chambers. So here they are. You have the right atrium, the right ventricle, the left atrium, the left ventricle. The atria are at the top, ventricles are at the bottom. So remember, this is low O2 on the right. This is high O2 on the left. This is sending to the systemic circuit, to the rest of the body, right, to oxygenate the body. And this is sending to lungs, or the pulmonary circuit. I'll just say to lungs here. This is quicker to write. So the atria, they're small, weak. Their job is to receive blood from the veins that are returning the blood to the body. They don't need to be very strong because they're just sending blood down into the ventricles beneath them. Gravity does most of the work, right? I mean, even if you're upside down, you can still move that blood because they do contract a bit. They also have, you can't really see in this picture, but you would see it in a heart dissection. They have these little floppy flaps that can expand when filled with blood to expand their volume, the volume of blood that they can hold. And those are called auricles. So auricles, they're in the atria. They are flaps that expand when full to increase blood volume that can be held. That can be held by the atria. All right, so ventricles. These are large, they're strong. They send blood to the body and lungs. So they have to be able to pump harder. They have to be able to really contract. All right, so another thing I'll point out here is that there are names for the walls between the atria and for the walls between the ventricles. So for example, this would be called the interventricular septum. Septum is a biological word for divider. Anything that divides, we could call a septum. And inter means between. So an interventricular septum, what it is in the name. It's a wall between the 2 ventricles. It's harder to see because of these blood vessels are in the way, but this right here behind this blood vessel would be called the interatrial septum. So let's talk about the arteries and veins that leave and enter the heart. Blood comes in from the body. So returning from lower body. All the oxygen's been given off to the lower body. These are veins that are returning blood to the heart from the upper body, like your head and neck and arms. The names of these are the superior vena cava and inferior vena cava. So superior and inferior vena cava. So this is the superior vena cava, this is the inferior vena cava. Superior is high, inferior is low. These are veins because they're returning blood. So blood comes in from the systemic circuit, from the upper and lower body, through the inferior and superior vena cava, into the right atrium. Then it travels down into the right ventricle, and then the heart sends that blood to the lungs through the pulmonary trunk. The pulmonary trunk divides into a right and left branch. So there's the left branch, there's the right branch, to go to the left and right lung so that the blood can be oxygenated. So this goes to pulmonary circuit. Once the blood has become oxygenated, it's going to return, but they're going to return in the pulmonary veins. There are two on the right, two right pulmonary veins, and two left. You can only see the left here. Blood coming back to the heart comes back through veins. Blood leaving the heart leaves through arteries. What do you think the pulmonary trunk is? It's leaving the heart for the lungs, so the pulmonary trunk is an artery. All right, so blood came back through the pulmonary veins. It comes back into this left atria, goes down to the left ventricles, goes out to the body, to the systemic circuit again, in the aorta. The aorta is a big ol' artery. And the aorta then goes to the systemic circuit. There's this thing called a box heart that you can draw if you're not an artist like me. I am not an artist. So let me erase all this. It makes it kind of easier to see. So a box heart is kind of like this. You just there's valves here, which we'll talk about in just a minute. Oops. All right, so we'll say pulmonary circuit is up here. This is obviously an oversimplification. This is a box heart. And you could just use it for studying purposes. So pulmonary circuit and systemic circuit. So blood enters, so remember the right side of the heart is always deoxygenated blood. So blood's going to enter the heart through the vena cava, inferior vena cava and superior vena cava, right? From the systemic circuit. So superior and inferior vena cava, that's here and here. And then it goes into the right atria, or atrium for singular. Goes through this valve into the right ventricle. Then it goes out through the pulmonary trunk. And it goes to the pulmonary system, to the lungs. It comes back from the lungs up here into the left atrium. And the name of the vessels it uses to return are the pulmonary veins. And remember, that's these. There's two on the right and two on the left, and then they all come together. Okay. It goes from the left atrium down to the left ventricle, and then is sent through the aorta to the systemic circuit, to the rest of the body. Okay? So that's a box heart just to help with the directionality. So now I want to talk about these valves. There's a bunch of valves here. And I've drawn them here. The valves control direction of flow. Because the thing is that when the heart contracts and squeezes on that blood, if there were no valves, half that blood would move backwards the wrong direction and only half would move forwards. So these valves make the passageway of the blood through the heart a one-way street. The valves only open in one direction. So let's look at these valves more closely. So you have two pairs of valves. So these valves are called atrioventricular valves. You have two of them. You have two atrioventricular valves, one there and one here. We call them AV valves for short. They're called atrioventricular valves because they're between the atria and the ventricles. So that's easy. Then we have semilunar valves. We call them SL valves for short. They are called semilunar valves because if you look at them, they have this kind of crescent moon shape, lunar for moon. So semilunar valves. All right, and there's also two of those. And each one has a specific name. So for the AV valves, for the atrioventricular valves, we have the tricuspid valve and the bicuspid valve. The bicuspid valve has another name. It's also called the mitral valve. They're named this for how many flaps they have. So the tricuspid valve has tri for three leaves or flaps. And the bicuspid valve, bi for two, has two leaves or two flaps on it. So this one is the tricuspid over here. And you just have to memorize that. It's on the right side. And this one is the bicuspid, also known as the mitral atrioventricular valve. Contraction moves through the heart like a wave. It starts in the atria and then it moves to the ventricles. So as the right atria contracts, it pushes blood this direction. When blood is being squeezed from atria to ventricles, the flaps open. Then the atria relax, the ventricles both squeeze. The blood tries to move back upwards, but all that ends up doing is slamming those valves shut. The blood cannot move backwards into the atria. But as the ventricles squeeze, the blood can move in this direction through the semilunar valves. And there's two semilunar valves. So SL valves. Let's look at their names. So two semilunar valves. There's the pulmonary valve and the aortic valve. They are named for their placement, right? So this is the aorta, so this is going to be the aortic valve. This is the pulmonary trunk or pulmonary artery, so that's going to be the pulmonary valve. So those ones are easy to remember. So again, the ventricles, when they squeeze, they can push those valves open. When the ventricles relax, because they're all the blood has been pushed out and now they're expanding, it creates a sort of vacuum that sucks the valves backwards, but that just sucks them closed. It slams them shut. So again, like the atrioventricular valves, they are one-way valves. Blood can only move through one direction. All right, so here's just another picture of that. So you have the right atrium and the right ventricle. You have the tricuspid valve, which is an AV valve, atrioventricular valve between the atria and the ventricles. So blood's going to move from the systemic circuit, from the inferior and superior vena cava, into the right atrium, through the tricuspid valve, into the right ventricle. Then it's going to leave through the pulmonary valve, which is a kind of semilunar valve. It can't move backwards because of when the blood does try to move backwards, but backwards movement of the blood just slams those valves shut. Same thing is happening at the same time on the other side. So the blood goes out to the pulmonary circuit. Then it comes back in, and it doesn't show you where it's coming back in here, but it comes back in the back of the heart through the pulmonary. So this is the pulmonary trunk. See? Unlabeled. It's good to be able to put labels in on your own. The pulmonary veins return. So they're going to be in the back here, and they branch like that. All right, so then you have the blood comes into the left atrium. The left atrium contracts, pushes open the mitral valve, also known as the bicuspid valve, which is another atrioventricular valve between the atria and the ventricles. Then the atrium relaxes, and the left ventricle squeezes, contracts. The blood pushes up against the mitral valve, slamming it shut, but it pushes open the aortic valve, which is also a semilunar valve. The mitral valve is an AV valve, right? And then goes out through the aorta to the systemic circuit again. When the ventricle relaxes, it sucks that semilunar valve shut. Both atria contract, then they relax as both ventricles contract, and then they relax. The lub-dub you hear for your heartbeat, ba-boom, ba-bum, we say lub-dub, lub-dub. That sound is the sound of the valves slamming shut. You have the atrioventricular valve slam shut, and then shortly after, the semilunar valves slam shut. One last bit of anatomy of gross anatomy inside the heart. So see these? These are the chordae tendineae. Chordae tendineae. Also known as the heartstrings. They are attached to the atrioventricular valves. And what they do is they anchor them so that they can't become inverted when that strong ventricle squeezes blood. You don't want these valves to invert back upwards into the atria. So you don't want the valves to go like that, because then the blood would be moving backwards. So instead of that, they anchor, these chordae tendineae anchor those valves so they can't invert upwards into the atria. And the heartstrings are attached to what's called papillary muscle, which are those tent-like muscles. Papillary muscle. They look like tents. All right, so I want to talk about the aorta. So the aorta is this big, major artery, also known as an elastic artery, that sends the blood from the heart to the rest of the body. And so it's very branching. You can see all these branches taking blood to the head, to the arms, out to all the internal organs. We'll learn names of most of those branches later. But all I need you to know now is the names of the different sections of the aorta. So this is the ascending aorta. Then it arches, right, in what's known as the aortic arch. Then it turns downwards in what we call the descending aorta. The descending aorta becomes the thoracic aorta. Oops. Thoracic aorta, as it descends through the thoracic cavity. And then it becomes the abdominal aorta. As it descends into the abdominal cavity. There's one last thing you need to know about the aorta. So there's the ascending aorta, the aortic arch, and the descending aorta. You need to know the right and left coronary arteries. These branches you need to know now because these branches feed and nourish the heart itself. So the heart wall is so thick that the heart cannot get enough oxygen and nutrients just from the blood running through the chambers. And besides, the right side of the heart is all deoxygenated blood anyway. There's only oxygen-rich blood running through the left side of the heart. So there's just not enough oxygen running through the chambers to feed the entire heart, and the heart muscle's too thick for the oxygen and nutrients to be able to diffuse from the chambers to all the heart tissues. So the heart has its own vascular system that keeps it oxygenated and that keeps it nourished. So the right coronary artery is a branch off of the aorta that brings oxygen-rich blood to the right side of the heart. And the left coronary artery is a branch off of the aorta that brings oxygen-rich blood to the left side of the heart. And you will have to learn some more names of the blood vessels that nourish the heart in another video.